Green hydrogen is basically, we're going to make a hydrogen fuel cell, which I'll talk a little bit about, but we're going to power that using renewable energy like solar energy or wind energy in order to create the hydrogen to begin with, hydrogen and oxygen to begin with. Okay, so let's just talk, first of all, why is hydrogen, why is water? In fact, the thing that they'll say is that water is the fuel, basically, and there's so much water, and so that's very useful for, quote, solving the energy problem, which I'm going to say is not really a legitimate way of saying it. But why is water useful? So water, we've discussed on the show before, water is a very polar molecule. That's why, for example, it helps to dissolve salt and things like that. And that's because the oxygens, so the two hydrogens are really attracted a lot to the oxygen. And so if you want to pull that apart, if you want to pull it apart, you have to put a lot of energy in order to do that. That also means that if you then have the separated hydrogens and you let them come together, and oxygen, you let them come together, that then you gain all that energy back. And that energy, when they rush in to each other, all that potential energy can become kinetic energy, and then you can use that to do different things. So what we have here in this red balloon, so this is filled with hydrogen. Let's talk about how do we actually create the hydrogen to begin with. So we do that by a process that is called electrolysis. So this is where we're going to start with a water molecule, actually I guess two water molecules, and we're going to convert that into two hydrogen molecules and one oxygen. So we have to conserve the same number of how many hydrogens we have and how many oxygens we have. And the way that we're going to do that is shown in this graphic over here. So on the right-hand side, we have there's water in the whole thing, and on the right-hand side, we are going to
so you'll notice that was kind of a slow
we're going to run a current through it. That's the most important thing. We have a current that's running through. There's a current that's running through this whole circuit clockwise, and so we imagine that we're going to take a hydrogen ion from the right-hand side, and we're going to pass it through this membrane to the left-hand side. So the ion is going through the water that way, and then there's electron. That it originally held, the electron is going to go up through the electrode and take the long way around. Now, the electron going around counterclockwise is the same as a current going around clockwise. And then on the other side, when that hydrogen atom gets to the other side, it'll pick up that electron. And so we're basically then, what does that do? We started off with a water molecule, and we end up with, instead, the oxygen of that water molecule on the right side, and we end up with the hydrogen molecules on the left-hand side. So we've been able to split these two apart. Okay, so that's the general reaction, that we have the two hydrogens, we get the water that splits into two hydrogens and one oxygen. We can also run the whole process backwards. So we can start with the two hydrogen molecules and the oxygen, let them come together to form one water molecule, and that works just in terms of the chemistry, but also it has to then release energy. So the same energy that we had to put in to separate it, we get that same amount of energy out, and it's about 286 kilojoules per 1 mole of these gases, so for basically a standard unit of putting these together. And that's the energy that we can then use, for example, to drive cars. Now, I just want to say this doesn't solve the energy problem, because you still have to get the energy to pull those apart to begin with. So it's not really for free. And the question of whether or not you end up using natural gas to do that, or solar power, or wind power, you can use anything. If you use something that's renewable, then that's going to be better. But we should really think of like a hydrogen fuel cell as being like a battery. So it's not really a power source as much as just a way to store that energy. Okay, so we have a couple fun toys. So I said we're going to do a little driving here. So here are a couple cars. So on the one hand side, I have they're basically the same, but one of them is in charging mode. So I have water that's in these two cells, and I'm running with a battery. I'm running a current through this, and you can see the bubbles coming up because I'm actually I'm bubbling out the hydrogen and the oxygen from this. And then in the other one, I've already done that. And so in this one, I've already separated out the hydrogen and the oxygen. So there's a bunch of gas that's down here. Originally, this was all filled with water, but instead I've converted it into gas. And now I'm just going to hook this up. I'm going to let those hydrogen and oxygens come back to each other and releasing energy. And that energy then I can use to power the motor on this thing. And so we can see not a very high-speed chase, but anyway, we have basically the basic tenets of a hydrogen fuel cell for a car. Okay, so I promised also that this would have something to do with fireworks. So let me just say that one other challenge of making a hydrogen fuel cell for a car is you have to make sure that the hydrogen and the oxygen are safe together. Because, in fact, hydrogen and oxygen together, you can also get them to release their energy very, very quickly, as we'll show in a second. So we need to have some way of storing the hydrogen in a way that will be safe to be carrying it around. You don't just want to have a big tank of hydrogen. That didn't go well for like the Hindenburg or something like that. So what we have here in this red balloon, this is filled with hydrogen, more or less pure hydrogen. And this is a blowtorch, which we're going to allow to start the reaction, basically to break the balloon and allow the hydrogen in the balloon to mix with the oxygen around it. And also, we're starting a reaction with the flame. So we're going to hear a little bit of fireworks here to see how that goes. Hopefully it goes well. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. OK, so you'll notice that was kind of a slow explosion because it takes time for the oxygen and the hydrogen to mix, because we're starting off only with pure hydrogen inside the balloon. In this balloon, this is filled already with a mixture of hydrogen and oxygen, so we're not going to have to wait for the two to mix, for the gas to diffuse into each other. It's all going to go at once, and that will be quite the firework indeed. So cover your ears for this. Here we go. 1, 2, 3.